Cool. So this says Sketch 101 on here. It's an introduction to Sketch, but in reality, it's going to be covering a lot more than just like the basics. The outline that I have here, and this is more of like working live in Sketch so then you guys can ask questions as I'm going through this. But I do have an agenda that I put together because there's a lot of things that we could cover when it comes to Sketch, and I wanted to hit on the basics so you have a foundation on how to use Sketch. So when you walk away today, you'll be like, oh, I get how Sketch works. And then some of the tips and tricks from using Sketch over the past few years. So first we'll cover why Sketch, really what the difference of Sketch is compared to some of like the Adobe products that you guys probably use on a day-to-day basis or previously have used. And then spending majority of the time in how do you actually use Sketch, and then related to that, how you work in Sketch, which I like to separate those two because Sketch is not just a really great design tool, it also really encourages collaboration with multiple designers in a single project. And then from there, building out a live demo. And I'm also going to show you some of the examples of other projects that I've done recently and kind of my process and really how to use Sketch. Then we'll kind of open it up for like questions and anything specific that you have. And each of these like subsections in how to use Sketch will dive into things like animations, how to create different types of graphics. And that's kind of the beauty of Sketch is I almost feel like when I'm using Sketch as opposed to like Illustrator, feel like it's like automatic making logos. And I don't know what it is. It's like Sketch has been built the way that design should have been made from the beginning for computers, not the way that like the Adobe products have really pushed us through. And when you look at some of those Adobe products, they haven't really changed since the beginning of once they came out. But we'll kind of cover that as we go into like the differences between Sketch as well as some of the Creative Suite. For this class, and like I'm a huge advocate that education should be free, and lessons can be learned from people with experience. So I do appreciate everyone that paid for today's event, and my goal is that it's worth every single penny that you put for this. The reason why it was paid is Kyle is a really great friend of mine, and what he's been doing at 301, especially throughout this past year with his own workshops, his own events, he's been paying out of his own pocket for them, and they cost a lot of money. And I've enjoyed every single one of them, every one that I can make it out to. If I'm in town, I'm there, or if I don't have my own event, I'm going to be there. And Kyle was talking to me about potentially like reducing the amount of classes and events he was putting on. And I was like, well, how can we, make sure that these stay alive in 2020? And that's why there was a charge for today. This is helping support Kyle, kind of the burn that he has in his own wallet for future events for 301. So I appreciate you guys not just supporting and paying for I guess to learn Sketch from me, but also supporting Kyle. So that's that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On my end.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
posting to Instagram about this too.
Oh, really? Did you get I didn't sign a waiver. Oh, there's that sign on the door.
It's up there. I'm sorry, man.
So this is my favorite part of the next 3 hours is I'm going to talk about myself. So this is a photo of me. This is when I was very tan, and I was a little bit more groomed. These days, startup days, entrepreneurship has really worn me down. But anyways, hi, my name's Kevin Mack. I'm nice transition almost on every single social media thing. So that goes for Instagram, my GitHub for those developers out there. I use this tag, and it's just been the tag that I've been doing for many, many years. It was an old company that I had. It's one of my first agencies that I started on my own. But nice transition. I'm that on Twitter. Facebook, I'm just Kevin Mack. It's boring. But I like to say I get excited and I make things. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I love every single aspect of digital as well as almost anything related to a computer, from designing to developing to audio, video, the inner workings of how computers work. I just get excited about all this. And if you ever catch me out and about and you bring up anything related to computers, design, marketing, the news, or anything, I just will get excited and you won't be able to shut me up. So, anyways, I'm also vegan. So, this is what I always put. So, it's all over my computer. And I like to say this is, hi, I'm Kevin Mack, I'm vegan. So, now you guys know that. It's great. But anyway, so I'm also a founder of the Columbus Web Group, and I'm an organizer today. We have Andy here, who's one of the organizers too. This has been going on now for the past 7 years. It is a group that is all about providing free education to the community. Our whole goal is each month we put on monthly meetups. We want people to come to our events and feel inspired and to learn something that they can apply the next day to whatever their life is. It's also a very diverse group. So we have designers, we have developers, we have project managers, we have people that are students. A lot of folks from Tech Elevator have been coming out, which is fantastic. And then we have people that have been in the industry for many, many years. But where we are really different than other meetup groups are we never really have like a developer up there like developing, or a designer being like, let me teach you Sketch. So like this would not really apply to one of our monthly meetups. It's always someone that's really established or has a good story in the industry or related industries that is applicable to our diverse group that comes out. And we work very closely with our presenters, anywhere between 1 month up to 3+ months, because we want everyone to make sure that their time that's coming to these events, they're left feeling inspired. We also do weekend workshops or similar workshops, something like today that we're doing. They are taken by request, so if there's something that you would like to learn, I always say reach out to us and we'll make it happen. So February. So I was at an event last night. Someone was like, I want to learn Figment. And I was like, I'm not really an expert on it, but Brian Vogel is. And then out of nowhere, Brian Vogel walked in the door. It was like magic. That literally happened. And so Brian's going to be doing a web group weekend workshop on Figment in February. I'm holding him to that. Make sure I don't forget. Yeah. Figma. Oh my God. I went to Disney World this week, so I'm thinking about Figment of your imagination. So whatever.
Figma would be a good one.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Group is
Thank
an
you.
amazing group. I've been trying to support them in whatever way we could, at least for like from a 301 standpoint. But yeah, it's the epitome of education to the masses, and it is one of the most diverse or just meetups that I've experienced yet. So
Yeah,
anyone who hasn't gone, I absolutely recommend it.
Yeah. We are actually the largest independent meetup group in the state of Ohio. We are not a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit. The silly joke, it's my dad joke, is like we're a for loss, and we're paid for from the community, the organizers, and if we have a sponsor for an event, we don't exchange money. So they actually will pick up the food and make sure it comes up there. So it's really driven by the community that it's a part of. It's just fantastic people. Anywho, I like to, share a lot about my past because it's really who I am. There's this idea of like your world, and this came from when I was a kid. So I feel like you've heard the story when I spoke last year. So
Possibly.
yes, you have.
If it was at the beginning, maybe not.
Yeah. Okay, so you may have missed it.
Like the first
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah. So I've been tagging this in the beginning of presentations, but when I was a kid, my mom was an art director at the Washington Post and worked in agencies here in Columbus. But she spent a lot of time with myself and my two sisters to really inspire us at a young age and to make sure that like creative thought was part of like who we were. There's this childhood memory that I have that my mom would like pick up a little Kevin and put him up like in the window, like a Simba moment. and another Disney reference.
She
And
does that to this day.
she does. She does. And she would say, like, this is your world. And it's like this idea about everything around you. Like, there's all these things that are out there that are inspiring. And it's not like the world's like forcing on you, but you can influence the world. So I've kind of lived that my entire life. I am one of those weirdos that started web development in the mid 90s. So when the public web was coming out and computers were developing, I was learning web development. But as I mentioned, my mom was an artist and a designer. So I grew up in a household where there was design, creative thought, but then I was also a nerdy, shy kid. And I went and started learning about development from those early stages. So this is where I say I was fortunate in as a child that I had this amazing history and support from my mom as well as my dad, who was more on the business side. So I kind of had this weird creative thought that was being, encouraged, and just really amazing parents that taught me at a young age to be creative. And then with that, having the ability to have access to things like a computer in the mid 90s, which were not inexpensive. And then just the network that was surrounding me. So then looking at 2019, so this year, I've been almost in every single role on the digital side. So I've been a designer, I've been a developer, I've been a print designer, I've been a project manager, I've been a scrum master. I have been on the corporate side, I've been in the agency side. I now focus in the startup space. I've started way too many businesses. I had also an antique business at one point where I bought, sold, and tweaked antiques. That's a story over a beer to share. But with that, it's like I've been in a lot of different roles and have learned a lot of things. And I've been incredibly fortunate for those opportunities and the people that have believed in me. And because of that, I have this unique, diverse background of being both a designer and a developer. So really quick, today I am, after in 2018, I ended my 8 other businesses. So it was actually December 31st of 2018. I was juggling 8 businesses and going primarily mad. But 3 years ago, we started a company that was the concept was to become the first and only legal way to discount alcohol. And that company is called Vibe. And today we do all adult beverage for Target as well as Speedway. And our technology is embedded directly inside of retailers' websites, mobile applications, loyalty programs, and their POS systems. So we work directly with state regulators. That's why I say we're the only legal way of doing this. And we now enable retailers to have discounts for adult beverage, same way like any other category does. So we're kind of behind the scenes. People don't know that we exist. And that's because our technology is embedded inside those applications. And we work closely with our retail partners to make sure that the adult beverage category aligns to all the other categories. I'm responsible for all product technology, development, our own branding, the integrations with retailers from both a user experience side, mobile development, integrations, optimization, and making sure that my history of working in mobile as well as the ongoing developing heuristics of the web are being brought into their experiences. So it's a really awesome company, and we've grown a lot. It's weird to look back 3 years and what we've accomplished, and we have some crazy goals for 2020. So if you don't know about Vibe, I would say use Vibe. If you drink beer, wine, spirits, we can save you anywhere between 20 and 60% off of your purchases. So
Just tag them on 301 story. Follow me yet.
Yeah.
Follow me, and then go get Vibe.
I mentioned this earlier, but this is kind of the agenda that we have here. And this is what we'll be covering. But if you have any questions, definitely raise your hand. And I need someone to keep me on track because I will get derailed real quick. And I know this is 3 hours, but we're already at half an hour. And but I'll still try to cover everything that we have here.
Yeah,
Just
do
try
you
to keep me on
want
track.
people, like, asking questions as you go, or would you prefer it be like?
Yeah, so I may say if you ask a question, like we'll cover that later. Hopefully that doesn't come off as a rude statement. And if we don't cover something that you wanted to, I'm always available afterwards. So I'm going to be sticking around here, and I have some business cards that have my cell phone and email. So I'm always happy to follow up afterwards. So that's the agenda. Why Sketch? What are the differences between Sketch and some of those programs that exist? How do you use Sketch? That's where we're going to be spending a lot of times. How do you work in Sketch? So that's going to be for those individuals that work on a team, and then a live demo here. And then best practices, resources, and those will be primarily sent out afterwards. So why Sketch? It is super easy to use. I describe it as like the interface of the application itself. It just makes sense, as opposed to if you've never used like Illustrator and you open up for the first time, you're like, I don't even know how to create an artboard or how to make multiple artboards on it. Within the first 5 seconds of using Sketch, you can figure that out. It's vector based. You can bring in non-vector images or graphics, but everything that you're doing in there can have an output of vector based, which for those that are Photoshop savvy, and if you're not savvy with some of the other vector-based things like Illustrator and InDesign, this is everything that you're doing is vector-based, so it makes everything to come out no matter what scale or size you want it to be. It's primarily focused on web design, and when I say web design, it's also a huge emphasis on anything really digital. And it's like we call it Columbus Web Group. That was just because there's not a name to call it. We could just call it like the Columbus Group, but that would be like, it sounds like a law firm. So web design aligns to definitely mobile and anything really interactive. It has a huge emphasis on UI as well as like logo and graphic creation. Graphic design, I kind of listed that there, but when it comes to making logos, I joked about this earlier. You can almost like instantly make a logo by mistake, and especially when I show you like some of the rotate copy stuff, you'll be like, oh, I can make a graphic like that really easily. And a lot of times, like if I'm doing placeholder demos, I'll be like, oh, let me make a graphic, and I'll just use one of like the features. So I'll show you guys later. It is really community driven. The plugins are so Sketch has this plugin capability. So if you're missing something from Sketch, you can go look for it, and it's probably existing out there. The community is very active. That's developing these. I even use Sketch nowadays, not just for web design and UI pieces, but even for print. So there's some plugins that allow capabilities of doing print design with inside Sketch. The exports imports will be a piece that we cover, but it's just really awesome how they do it. It's intuitive, and from a single artboard or a single grouping of your design, you can put it out in every single format. I mentioned the community. There's a lot of forums that are out there, and people are active on it, and they're really there to support you. From the design community, here in Columbus, we've had some ups and downs, but there's IXDA is probably one of the best design communities here. 301, that's why I love supporting it. To me, it's one of the best creative spots here in Columbus. But when it comes to outreach about how to use things, you're primarily stuck on like the Adobe forums. They're not really great. But as a developer, we have so many different resources that are active that people are contributing to. Sketch is really one of the first that I've seen that is so active, fast to respond to. And their forums and their support on their website is absolutely amazing. You can do some quick prototyping, so animations. This will be something that we cover. I'm one of those people that, if I want to do a quick prototype, a lot of times I use Keynote. That's kind of and I'm very involved with Keynote and the hacks inside of it. But in a quick demo, you can see how you can really put together a wireframe or an example of a UI to click through. Well, this is going to be a huge piece. It's just the tools that are involved inside of it. Again, they make sense. They're very different than the Adobe products, but they work probably the way that you imagine they should work, not the way that you've kind of inherited how they work from the Adobe side. As I said, there's a section about collaboration. Sketch really does focus on how teams communicate, collaborate, especially reuse resources. So just Sketch versus Adobe. Not going to spend too much time here. So it's so Adobe products are cross-platform. This is a minor negative on the Sketch side. It is only meant for Apple, and you have to have either a really expensive MacBook or a Mac Mini or be on OS X or have some Frankenstein machine. So it only works on OS X. Both of them have a vector-based approach, but you're limited, as I said, in Photoshop with that. There's some ways of doing it. History is actually a little bit better inside of the Adobe products, especially in Photoshop. That's one of the best features that they have, that you can go back and you can actually bridge off of something that you've done and create a new version of your document. In Sketch, there's some plugins that try to do that, but you have unlimited undos, and sometimes you find yourself undoing about three hours of work, and it happens quicker in an Adobe product, but it never loses your history as long as you don't close out of the product, which can be good and bad if you hit save at the wrong time when you're doing that. Photo editing is much stronger, of course, in a program like Photoshop, Lightroom, and some of those ones, but that's where Adobe has their strength. With the focus of Sketch being on vector-based as well as creating graphics and interfaces, this is something that's limited inside the Sketch world. The actions inside of the Adobe products, I utilize them. That's one of my favorite pieces of Photoshop, and the data imports inside of InDesign are a lifesaver. So I said earlier that I primarily do print design in Sketch. I may start a template in Sketch just because I have the shared assets that I'll cover, but the data merge inside of InDesign is mind-blowing. Are you guys familiar with data merge? So basically you create a single InDesign file, and you can have an Excel spreadsheet, and you can import that Excel spreadsheet, and it will create all the artboards based off of each row inside that Excel spreadsheet. So if you're doing anything like, we use it for our print designs for Target and Speedway, they're automated from our API. So we have an Excel spreadsheet that we create, and then we import it into InDesign, and it creates thousands of our signs within seconds. That's really cool. Exports, imports, they're a little bit more limited with the exceptions of some of like the print products that are out there or the vector-based ones. Color picker, this is actually where Sketch gets into the benefits of it. So it's not limited just to the Adobe product. You can go outside of it, and I'll show you a demo of that. Print design, even though I kind of hacked Sketch to do print design, Adobe does a little stronger there. I'm talking about a lot of the negative stuff, but that's before I get into the hours of talking about how great Sketch is. Drawing tools, especially something with a Wacom or Wacom pen, is probably the preferred use would be something like an Illustrator as opposed to Sketch. Their pen tool is kind of lacking. And when it comes to just job interviews, everyone that classifies himself as a designer primarily already knows all the Adobe products. It's just like if you're a designer, you have to know Photoshop. And in the past 2 years, I've now seen Sketch becoming a suggested or requirement on jobs. And so, but up till really recently, it wasn't that, like, and most designers are taught Adobe products in college, schools, or on their own, and no one's really teaching Sketch. So those are the differences, and we'll kind of cover them throughout. And if you have questions about, like, hey, I do this in Adobe product X, like, what's the difference? The only thing I will say also on that is, oh, what's the one program that came out? Adobe put out a product that was trying to compete with Sketch, and it is a far less superior version of Sketch.
XD?
Yeah, XD. And a lot of people try to make that comparison. They stole a lot of the ideas from Sketch, but it's not quite there. Biggest other major benefit is Sketch is super inexpensive and Adobe is very, very expensive. And that's probably another reason why so many people have just adopted it. All right, now getting into Sketch stuff. When you open it, and this is a screenshot that I took. So Sketch actually came out with a few new versions in the past month. So you may, when I actually open up Sketch, you'll see these look a little bit different here. But when you first open it, it has this panel, and it doesn't show anything else, which is kind of unique. But this aligns more closely to some of those native OS X applications that exist. So it doesn't bring up the document first. You see all your recent pieces and templates, which we'll cover. And then off to the left-hand side, a lot of times you ignore those little callouts, but that's where it's like the cloud. So all your Sketch files can actually live in a resource that you can access anywhere and also collaborate with other people. There's Sketch Mirror, which I will show you a demo of. It's where you can actually see it on different devices in the right size. The newsletter is one of the best newsletters that you can sign up for. And then they also have some of those intro guides to Sketch, and they're pretty intuitive and great to kind of dive in there if you have questions. But it also brings up all your previous projects that you've had. I think it maxes out because this would only be 12, but I think it goes up to 20 inside there. And then these templates, and I will show you a demo of this. You can download templates. So if you do iOS development, Android development, a lot of their core interface pieces exist, and they've been created by Apple as well as Android. If there's other mainstream stuff, you can just download them and have access to them. Certain things like making app icons for iOS nowadays, you have to create like 7,000 of them. There's a single template that you can drop an image in, and it will generate all those variations, all the different sizes in the right naming convention. So if you ever have to work on a mobile application, someone's like, give me the app icons, it's not a headache. That kind of does it for you. Some of these are also really great starting points if you're building out an interface or prototyping something. So anyways.
I made a circle over here on the frame.
What was that?
I made a circle.
Oh, yeah. See, it's easy to do.
I think that I'm already ahead of the
Yeah.
here.
This is just a little looping video here that just shows like the documentation is very clean. Unlike some of the other design programs out there, they've done a really good job on breaking it down and categorizing it into how you would actually utilize this. So Sketch, the makers of this, have really found a great way to get people to learn this product and to get into their, I don't know, to use it instead of Adobe. If you have to answer it, it's okay. Okay. All right, cool. So, yeah.
Please turn your chair around.
Yeah. I forgot to say, please mute all cell phones. Video is not permitted. No. So this is I'm gonna blow through this really quick, and then we're gonna open up Sketch. But this is what it looks like when you open up a document. Sketch has really 4 main areas. There's that top panel off to the left, and then off to the right. So the main area is what's referred to as a canvas. It is an infinite canvas. It never runs out. This is where you add all your artboards and the pieces that you're working on. You can create a design without it having an artboard. So if you download an SVG and you open it up in Sketch, so the SVG can also be opened up in Sketch. It won't have an artboard behind it, but you can still actually edit and work inside of it. This is really nice because as you're working on a product and you want to make variations of it, you can just copy and make a new artboard and see the variations underneath it. So it can all be in one spot. Off to the left is what is referred to as pages. Consider these like groupings of the work that you're doing. I typically make up a section that I refer to as element collage. I'll walk you through what that is, and then I'll create one that's like wireframes and then my actual design. So instead of having multiple files, I just have one of them and they're organized off to the left-hand side. This is also where all the layers are put in and where you can kind of select everything. Off to the right-hand side is one of the coolest features of Sketch. It's this contextual menu. So as you select and interact with anything inside the canvas, it will actually change and adapt to what you're working with. It's super smart and it enables you to work very, very quickly. This is what an artboard looks like once you make it, and I forget what my next slide is here, but artboards are inside canvases, the pages, artboard. We'll go over all this as we go through it. I don't know why it's clicking, but this is what I was saying. It's contextual, so once you have anything selected, it'll change off to the right-hand side. So this is a selection of an artboard. You can see that it has some of the sizes there and things that are related to the artboard, and that is kind of bringing it all together. The search feature is amazing in Sketch, and it's also interactive, and this is something that I'll be doing throughout. That's why I wanted to highlight it here. So if you can't find something in Sketch, you can just type it in there and it'll show up. This feature was just rolled out in the last version of Adobe products. It's not in all of them, but I just realized that as I was putting this together, that you can now do this in both Illustrator as well as Photoshop. I haven't tested it in InDesign. Yeah, InDesign has it now too. But this was originally inside of Sketch. So cool. Enough talking about Sketch. We will open up Sketch. So there is a free trial if you don't have Sketch. I think is it 30 days?
Yeah, it's 30 days.
Yeah.
Sketch.com.
Yeah. And then you can buy it. It's a one-time fee to buy it, but then they do encourage you to subscribe, which gives you unlimited updates. So if you don't renew, it doesn't get removed from your machine. Your license is still available, but it maxes out at the last version that you paid for. So you just can't get the upgrades inside of it. So as I said, here are all my artboards inside here. They did move the templates very recently off to the left-hand side as opposed to the top. So these are different things that are inside of here. Recent documents, and then, as I mentioned, the get started stuff. But I'm just going to hit a Control New, and it's going to open up a new Sketch document. I'm going to try to avoid using the shortcuts inside of it. So if you see me magically move from one thing to another, I use shortcuts in like everything I'm doing. So I will try not to do that. All right. So here we are inside the canvas here. And this is an untitled document. I'm just going to give it a file name so I don't forget to do that in the rare case that this crashes. We have it here. If I want to create an artboard, as I mentioned, there's a help here, and you can go to artboard, article, artboard, and type it in, and it brings up all these different things, and you can see that it highlights. As I mentioned, these are now also available in Adobe products. The cool thing is, as you see where that's hovering, off to the far right, it says A, and then there's an S and an H. That's actually the shorthand keys for getting to making one of these like different objects or interactive pieces. So I can click either on that menu, I can say Insert Artboard, or I can just hit the letter A on my keyboard and start dragging. If you see this, this is now like the kind of the tool that comes up here. If I hit T, it switches over to text, which is really awesome. If I switch to R, it makes a rectangle, and O makes an oval. So those types of things you would just get used to, and that's why it's really hard not to do these types of shortcuts, because you get very used to doing them. So this is me making an artboard. I hit A, and then I can just drag it. Now off to the right-hand side, you can see that this is custom. There's some built-in ones that I can say like, oh, I want it to be a mobile. And there's various things that you can also download and install in here. Typical sizes that would come up. You can create your own custom size that's available out there. If I want to see the Apple devices, so these come in by default. Here's the iPhone 8 size. Here's the 11 Pro. So if I'm designing for it, all the dimensions kind of just change off to the side, and you see my artboard kind of switch around here.
That stuff just update automatically, or is that?
Yeah, so those are updated automatically, but you can also make your own. So if I had some weird custom size, I can create one, and then it's accessible. So any questions about that? Because this is kind of a weird part of Sketch, but that's what makes it powerful. And then switching the different sizes, so horizontal, vertical. And that's right there inside. One of the pieces that also kind of makes Sketch really, really cool, and I'm going to look at my notes to make sure that I didn't miss anything before diving anything else here. Okay. I mentioned this earlier, infinite canvas. So you can see that this is here. Whoa, cool, right? And I, by accident, had that hidden off to the left-hand side. So that was a shortcut. If you hold down Command, Option, Control, which are these three keys right next to each other, if I hit one, it will hide one, which is this panel right here. If I hit those three and hit 3, it will hide this panel over here. And so that's just kind of good to know. But you can also go to like View and hide those off to the side. So you can see that those are kind of right there. So if I have this selected, the artboard right here is highlighted. And as I mentioned earlier, this is an infinite canvas. Just like any other program, if I hold down Option and drag, I can make a new one. So I can make a new artboard just like that. And I can also right-click on it and say Duplicate. And I have another one right there. This is really, really awesome if you're working on variations of things to have them stacked up. One of the things that I've been doing is for each variation, I've been stacking them vertically next to each other. So if I'm working on different screens, I'll have the screens going from left to right and variations going from up to down. A kind of important or like best practice is to organize things from top down, left to right. And there's some weird quirks with any program that you have kind of, unorganized layers and artboards. If you're selecting something and kind of taking advantage of like the smart selections that's built in, any program can get confused by it. That's why I always go from like what's up here, here, here. And then if I were to copy these artboards, paste them in here, I would move these right here and then put them right after this. So then it kind of goes in this order of like, so from top down, left to right. And I do that with all my layers. And I've been also, for some reason, I'm very obsessive about layers in Photoshop and other design programs. I do that in everything. And that's just kind of like a best practice when designing. And is one of those annoying things that you have to remember to do, but it is very helpful for selecting. And then giving these all unique names, and that will be very important once exports come up.
That's a good bit of answer. Basically what you're saying is simulate user flow from left to right in terms of what screens they're going to see, and then to top to bottom variations of the design. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So, and then naming these so that it's not like copy to layer 5,200, make it be something that people can actually learn. And I'm going to kind of cover more on this side here in a moment, but just wanted to show you like the infinite canvas here. And if I wanted to make something crazy over here, I could. when we get into like the zooming pieces here in a second, I will show you how to highlight if I'm all the way over there to do something like, oh, I want to get back right there. There's some quick shortcuts to do that, which is really nice. Now, getting into this menu up here, I have made some variations on it. And there's just some small things that I've done. So this is almost out of the box. So your sketch may look different than what I have. If you click anywhere where there's not a button, there's this customized toolbar. So inside here, you can add different things that you use or your team uses frequently. The other really important thing to do is to probably put on icon and text until you get really familiar with Sketch. It only adds probably about, I would say that's about 25 pixels of vertical height taken up here. But it does help you understand because it's like, what does that even mean? What is this? Like, I wouldn't know that means edit without the edit there. But one of the things I specifically edit anytime I'm in Sketch, it's like the first time I open up Photoshop, I create a keyboard shortcut to do a crop because it is so annoying that there isn't like, you have to press so many keys to do a crop. And when I'm in Photoshop, I crop all the time. Scissors I use religiously inside of Sketch. So I usually just drag that in here and put it right there. So that's how you add something from here. There's also variations inside, like this rotate copies is really, really cool. But that's basically it. If you screw it up, you can set to default. Where is that? Or drag. Set to default. It's somewhere on here. One of these buttons does it. But, oh, you can drag. This is the default one. Man, that is actually the example of it. So if I drag that up there, it will set my browser to default. There used to be a checkbox. So that is kind of the good and bad thing that Sketch has these updates, but they're all driven from the community. So it's like most likely probably something that you've had an issue with that someone else has complained about. All right. That's kind of it from this menu. You do use it as you get familiar with the shortcuts. You stop using it as much as possible, or you don't use it as much as when you're getting familiar with it.
I'm going to interject real quick.
Yeah.
It's 7 o'clock. Mike has to plug his meter now, but if anybody else wants to.
Is that how you play flute? Yeah.
Yeah, a real flower swoop there.
No, a kazoo. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Side question that was asked, and I want to bring this up because I feel like Sketch. I teach a lot of classes on CSS and HTML. I feel like CSS, I could teach you CSS in 5 minutes. I can teach you HTML in 5 minutes. But to actually learn CSS, like actually learn CSS and HTML, there's a lot of things that you need to know about it, and it takes a lifetime of perfecting it. So whenever I'm teaching anything, I don't want to just like get directly in there. So this has been a little bit slower, and we're going to kind of dive into it. And with like CSS, HTML, so Sketch does have some exports into HTML and CSS. It's similar to like how Adobe products do that. For myself, contributing to web standards, working on specs and drafts, it's some of the most brutal, ugliest code I've ever seen in my life. If you're looking for an auto-generated HTML, CSS, or website from a design program, don't think that. It doesn't actually exist. It will only work in certain browsers, and anyone that's actually going to be like hiring you for HTML and CSS, if they look at the code, they will know that was auto-generated. And if you ever need to tweak or change any of that code, it will be the worst nightmare of your life. So if you're interested in learning HTML, CSS, I'm always down to meet up one-on-one, share some of my own videos and other things. But that's definitely a whole nother course outside there. And I wish these programs never introduced the idea of like auto-generating anything. I wish everything in life could be auto-generated, but hey, whatever.
Friendship would be great.
Yeah, auto-generate friendship. Go. So I'm going to start with the left side here. So, you know, I created these artboards and I kind of organized it in this manner from kind of, again, top to bottom, left to right. Inside here, this is a highlighted artboard. So when it's highlighted, it has this blue. You can change the settings on there. If I go here, it also highlights it. If I want to add a layer here, it seems like, well, what do I do? Like, I can't right click. This is confusing. If you want to insert, you actually have to like insert not a layer, but whatever it is that you're making. So in the case that I want to make a rectangle, I can say like insert shape, and then you can see all these like predefined pieces inside here. So a rectangle's R, an oval's O, rounded, and line. So I'm just going to hit the R key here and go inside of this artboard and put it inside there. So now you can see like there's somewhat, they're not really layers, but the concept of layers exist, and this is inside this artboard. You can collapse them inside there. So that's a little bit different. Similar to how I can copy artboards, I can do the exact same thing with any of these symbols inside here. So I can drag and drop and do another one right here. You'll also notice that they have all these like kind of calculations in between, which are really nice. And as you add more items to the canvas, it'll try to get smart with you, which is fantastic, and align to the grid system that you're aligning to here. And then I treat my layer, I'll call them layers, the same way as I did with the artboards, kind of from top to bottom. Again, it's just all organizational pieces inside here.
So those work the same way as like Photoshop, for instance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then right here, I can select multiple ones. I can say group selection, and now they're in their own little like kind of folder right there. And then from there, I can copy that. I can also just do a classic Control-C-V, but I usually have a bunch of things written to my own kind of memory. And if I'm copying something, it's not to just create more layers here. I usually hold down the Option key and drag it just like so. So that's kind of like how the setup of this all works here. And getting on the right-hand side, which is the powerful piece. At the top, you know how Photoshop, you have to like click on a billion things and like get the menu at the top. It's somewhat contextual. Everything that you're doing in Sketch is on the right-hand side here. So the alignment is right there. If I want it to the left side versus the right side, the top, the bottom, the middle. Oops, yeah, middle. And then centered in the middle of my canvas. So it's always based off the canvas that you have here. If you have things that are going outside the canvas like this, they become hidden. If you highlight them, you can see that it's still there, which sometimes can throw off some of the calculations. But with that, it keeps it kind of masked inside of it. And I actually really like that in the idea of thinking about it as screens and views and what a true artboard is. Centering it back here. Underneath here, we have X and Y, which is X coordinate and Y coordinates, basic math that you probably learned in 3rd grade. Sketch looks at objects way differently on where they're placed inside the canvas. Who here is really good at math? For the record, no one raised their hand except for myself. But say you're really bad at math, that's okay. But we can start doing things like this. 0, which for the X coordinate, it's the left side moving to the right side. If I want to do 20, it's going to move it 20 from the left side, and that's what it's basing. I can also hold up my up and down, and it will slowly move 1 pixel at a time. You can also do shift, which moves in increments of 10. So that's pretty basic, but what the cool thing about this is I've always been one of those people that enjoys like mathematics around graphic design and keeping things almost like around equations, so everything's balanced out. And then once it's very like mathematically correct, then doing those like visual centers and those adaptations to the design to make sure that even though it's calculated correctly, it may look a little off. Because there's like the visual center versus like the true center that exists out there in design. But for Sketch, especially when you're building on an interface, precision's really, really important, and this gets you there. So I can move 20 pixels here. I can go on the Y and do 20/20. So that's 20 pixels from the top, which is the Y, and 20 from the left, which is the X coordinate. It does treat the X and Y from this kind of piece right here. Now, the cool thing is, if you're really bad at math and you want to use math in Sketch, you can. So I can do the classic times symbol, and I can say ×3, and it will move it over 60 pixels. So I can take, say, one of my default margins was 5, and I was like, I want it to be 10 times more than, that's an easy number. Let's say 7.5. It will multiply that out for me, and that's really cool. And then I can also divide, so use the slash and say half of that, and it will move it half that amount inside there.
So it has a built-in calculator.
It does. If I do something like this, it will actually move it down 50% based off the origin of this. If I do 100%, it will move it all the way 100% off that. If I want to do 10% of my canvas, it will do 10% of my canvas. 20% right here. So if you're not a math nerd, no need. It will calculate for you. I know I've spent way too many times in a Photoshop document either pushing pixels myself or opening up my calculator, which probably has some kind of joke if I open it. Good, it doesn't. And, you know, trying to do it. You don't need to do that. Sketch can do it. And also just a really cool thing here is like I use more like crazy calculations in just like my Finder. You'll see me navigate through a Mac a little bit differently. I use Command space everywhere I go, so I never even use any of like the Finder tools. I just use this. And I stopped using some of those other search ones. I just use native stuff. So if I like want to open up like Navicat, I just type it in there. Same thing with like documents.
With your calculations, was that number based on the upper left-hand corner?
Yeah. So.
Is that, can you change that? Like, can I have it in the center, or can I have it? Because I know Illustrator.
Yeah, you can change the origin of where it is. Yeah. So. I typically don't do that. It's
just always the
yeah. So it's looking at the point here as well as here, and those are like settings that, you know, it's similar if you change some like the default behaviors in applications and you go on someone else's machine. You're like, what is wrong with this? So I try to keep true to what things have, unless you really need to do that and you're working on your own. Yeah.
Can you, with the alignment, can you select the rectangles separately and align them just as is, not on the artboard, but just like align them?
Yeah, so I would have to select each individual one. So if I wanted this one to be over here and then this one to be over here, I could. And the cool thing about this is, and I wish this was in other programs, so I have this one on the left side and this one on the right side. I can say from here, I want it to be 20 pixels from there, and then do plus 20 here, which is not that hard of a calculation. So those types of things are really, really powerful in this. That is, if I had to list one of my top 3 favorite things in Sketch, it's probably that. And then it also has really smart calculations. Again, this will adapt and change based off of what you've designed inside the artboard itself. Now, getting into really the next piece inside here is these resizing pieces, which we'll cover once we get into symbols, because it's a little bit, it makes a little bit more sense covering it there. So we'll circle back to that. There's what's referred to as appearance, and there's different things that you can do. So Sketch has the ability for an individual document to have styles that you set for the sketch file. But then you can have global ones and then library ones that you inherit. So say that you always wanted, instead of this being red and white, and this is actually something that I overwrote from the beginning. So if I go here and I say like default, says default style, you can update this. So instead of it being red, by default it's like a dark gray with a light gray background. And I found myself every single time having to update 2 different spots inside of here. In the gray for me, and I work long hours and I sleep very little, a light gray, it doesn't have enough contrast for me, and I may not actually see it being inserted inside my artboard. So I intentionally overwrote it to be red with the 2 border with no fill inside of it. If I wanted every single time I make an object to be a blue or whatever this purple color is, I can highlight it, and I actually forget where that is. That's why I like to use this, set as default style. I have this. So the next time I make something, it's going to have that style inside of it. And that's contextual to the actual document that you have.
Nice.
So,
Finally.
yeah.
Right? That's beautiful.
So right here, going down here, these are global ones. This is more of like a nice to cover. This is something, once we go through this, you should be able to explore and go through these. But there's some like system ones. As I said, you can make your own. You can switch these if there's a library that you have and use it across. So if you have a global brand, you can make it once and reuse it on all your products. Going down here, and you can also create your own right underneath this vent. Getting into just opacity. Oh, you can go up and down. There's things you can type in here, so you can type in your keyboard. Cool, great. That's 20%. The blend modes are kind of hidden underneath here. So right here you see normal. The blend modes are put in here. They're different than the blend modes that are in Photoshop. Photoshop actually, so if you know anything about what blend modes actually are, they're calculations on the program side, and each of these have their own calculations on what the colors are produced. Photoshop, from the beginning of time, made their own proprietary alignment to what they are. So an overlay in Photoshop versus an overlay in Illustrator versus in Sketch may be a different result than what you think, but that's because Sketch is actually using the true formula and the spec of what it is. So in CSS, so styling for the web, these blend modes all exist today, but they're one for one in Sketch as they are in the browser, but they're slightly different in Photoshop. It's just one of those weird things. And if they were to ever now recorrect or go back and correct that, it would probably create like a new war. I don't even know how that would work. But so let's see. Before getting into blend modes, there's this style section here, and all these can be collapsed. I don't know why you would ever do that. If you do it by accident, it's really annoying, especially if you're tired, to find out like, where are my color selections? I wish there was a way just to turn that off permanently. There may be some deep setting inside here, but these are all maybe just so you can see these stacked up. I don't know who would ever do that. But inside here, as I showed you earlier, let's select this guy, and you can see my fills. So fills are the background color of whatever the shape is that you have, and then you have borders. So let's make this America. Why is that? Oh, I'm down here. You can also put in the hex value here. If I change this. Give me 1 second. Because I like to think in hex values. Oh, underneath it, this is a hidden like kind of feature here. It's because I have it highlighted. Oh no. There is a way to shift this from hex to RGB that I am failing to remember.
What the heck's Kevin?
I know, what the hex is right?
Hold on, going back.
I know, sorry guys. I'm a failure. Oh, you know what? It's not there, it's right here. So you can put your RGB here, and then from here has the breakdown of all of them. This is actually something, this didn't used to exist inside Sketch, so it just gives you that value. There's probably a way to override that default. So inside here, if you want to change it, the color picker, you can click on this and kind of select what color it is. This is alignment to the operating system color picker, which is really nice. So any of the ones that you're typically used to seeing, default is based here. Underneath here, there's document, there's global colors. So you can set global colors that you can reuse from one to another. And then libraries that you bring in can have their own colors. When you select those, it will actually change down here the colors that you've selected. So if I click this plus symbol, we've now added that color as a document color. I can then convert this into global settings if I wanted to and change the variations on it. All the basic stuff are here. You know, there's an opacity there, but again, it's also out there, so it's kind of a quick dive. Now, the cool thing about this is because it is native, I can actually do a color picker and pick anything on my entire browser. So if I wanted this yellow, I can pull it right there. This is extremely affected by your settings that you have for your screen displays though. So you do use color picker in any program with caution. If you've ever run into the case where you're even in a Photoshop document and you're using the built-in picker there and you're grabbing it from their color picker, based off the settings that you have inside that document as well as your operating system are going to change where it is. So like say for example this red, which red is FF000. If I had this color outside here and I had some weird display settings on system preferences and displays, and my color settings were changed to one of these, FF00 or F with 4 zeros is a true red, but if I change it to one of these and then I go back and do a color picker on that red, it's going to register as another hex value or another RGBA or RGB color based off my screen settings. So yes, it is easy to do. If you play with those at all, or if you're connected to a really crappy monitor, your monitor may adjust your screen settings. So it's just something to use with caution. That's why I always say, like, you know, come up with a color scheme from the beginning, make it be consistent in line with your brand, and then pick from it. All right, to turn them off, I can highlight it and check right here. Cool things about this are we're going to keep this border red, and then we're going to make this inside a blue. Cool. Now I can actually add kind of layering of colors behind it. I can hit this plus, and I can do another solid color. So I can have two different layers right here. So this, let's just make this be a white. Now, oops. So if I go back here to this object, I'm gonna make this bigger so you can see what I'm doing. If I remove this, it's blue underneath. And I had a, why is that so light? Did I change the blend mode on that or something? Oh, on the entire layer here, thank you. Where did I do that? There it is. So each individual layer, as well as like the layer itself, have their own. So toggling that on and off. This is nice if you want to do variations. Like I want this to be half white. I can go here and then this will give me the blue color with this white on top of it. There's a lot of times when you're doing design, if you have something, I could also create the same effect by taking this and making it be 50%. But when I export this, this is always going to have the 50% behind it. The only true way of making that be solid is to do something like this. And now you see that that's cut back there. You can also add in gradients. So inside here, this is gradients. And this tool you can play with. It's the same way that's done in any native one. If you hold down Shift, it kind of locks to different coordinates. I can move this up and down. And again, this is not anything specific to Sketch. It is the native kind of color picker. I can increase the opacity of this in this point here. But if I hit one of the numbers 1 through 0, it actually changes it based off of where it is percentage. So if I hit 5, oops, select this little dial here and I hit 5. What is going on here? Believe me, it works.
You want me to pull it up in Illustrator?
No. Oh, come on. Oh my God, I'm all over the place today. So if I go here, I can select this and move this guy. So this guy, ooh. Based off of the coordinate points of where it is on my mouse here. So give me 1 second here. Goofy. I'm expecting this to move from like 1 point to 3 points. So this is called doing a live demo and something that I do all the time. And now I'm goofing this up, but trust me, it's probably something that I'm doing here, but if you highlight this and hit 1 through, it has a grid based off 10 and it will move based off of where it is. But you can also just do the same treatment here by adding it here. If I want to change these colors inside here, I highlight it and you can see that the colors change. Let's go to like a green color here, and I'm really bothered.
Points, like within the
Yeah,
thing too?
yeah, so if I go like that, there it is. I don't know why that wasn't working, so maybe it's, I don't know why that was happening. But this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be like in the middle. So that's 50%, 60%, 70%, 20%, which is really, really nice to do. But this is layered on top of it, and I can then also change the opacity just like a solid color, and you can see that layered on top of it. You can also apply blend modes from right here. Oh no,
Blend
it's not.
modes are definitely different than Photoshop.
Yeah.
Play around with that.
Yeah. And you can, this is where it's really nice because like this is where it also aligns to more of like the development side. In CSS, you can add multiple, like you can layer different backgrounds and different methods. And also same thing with like box shadows and all the different borders. You can add multiple ones inside here. So it kind of treats it more similar to how code is written without you having to nerd out and learn how code is. This is really important to also recognize is this piece. So it's inside, outside, center. If I make this 20 pixels, you'll see it more in the center inside of it. I typically go on the inside just because of like grid stuff, and then I have to shift things around. I like to subtract and think about things inward as opposed to outward. Center is just a weird one, but that's the typical design thought process there. All right, and then shadows down here, same thing. These are beautiful, and they actually, they're a little bit different than other design programs, but these are the exact same things that are written in CSS. So when you do like a box shadow, it follows the X, Y, and blur. So this aligns directly to it, and then the color associated with it. And you can actually add multiple ones inside of it. So to show you a blur, this is great. So the question about CSS and other things, this becomes a better guideline is to open up Sketch and see some of these selections from like the border width that's like right here, the colors that were being used, the shadows, and even like the blend modes that happen inside of Sketch. So they become very true to how they actual export or how you'd want to build this up. And one of the weirdest things inside of Sketch is this blur. Why it's weird is that does actually exist in HTML and CSS and interface design, especially on mobile development in Xcode. But if you export this as a vector, it doesn't work very well. And that's the same issue that also all Adobe products have. So if you're doing this for something that's going to be vectored, unfortunately, there's still no good solution for a blur here. And some of these are really silly. But if you export this out as a flattened image, so as like a JPEG, a bitmap, a GIF, to be annoying and say it that way, it will actually render the way that you see it on the screen here.
So what's the difference between that and PowerPoint?
The what and what? This in
That
PowerPoint?
looks like PowerPoint.
I know, right? This is how all my designs usually look. And then the export underneath, you can export individual layers and you see a little preview of it. This is what's really, really cool here is, so if I look at this, I skipped over this one piece. This is 159 by 176. That's stupid size. If I want to make this a square, 150 by 150. The drag controls are there. If I hold down shift, it goes like this. Not the new way that Photoshop does it.
I hate the new way.
It's, are
You
you
don't have to hold
joking?
anything.
Like it really, really bothers me. Like it's one of the
No, I'm being serious.
It is literally.
I fucking hate it.
I have no idea why they did
I
that.
hate it.
Yeah. So this is a way that you think how something should scale, and you can hold it down. But then if you don't hold down shift, you can also do the typical things that you would do. If I'm in the middle of scaling it, like like going like this, I can hold down shift and it'll go back to the square shape or the original dimensions. So it keeps the proportions based off what I had. So that's if I know I want to make it 150 by 150. There it is, which is important here. 1x, this is going to come out at 150 by 150. If I do 2x here, it is going to be at 300. So this will come across at 2x of what the size is. You can also, I was about to try to lift up my computer to show you this, to get over that fan.
Sorry.
Yeah, so to show you this prefix, suffix right there underneath it. What?
Mr. and Mrs.
Mr. Mrs.
Wait.
Oh, yeah, I get it now. You can say suffix or suffix, and that's if you want the output of this to have something at the end, and then the reverse of that if you wanted something in the beginning. Typical best practices when you're doing 2x, you say something like at 2x to identify what it is. This is also how iOS recognizes large images. So it's just one of those, naming conventions. On the right of that, you have the format. So ping, jib, tiff, wp, PDF, EPS, and SVG. So the vector-based ones are down here, and then the ones that are going to be more static are up here. Now you can also export multiple things at the same time. I can hit this. And this will now give me a default one. So a PNG that's at 1x, so at 150, and one that's at 2x with the suffix at the end of 2x. Now the file name in the beginning of this is my layer name here. So I could call this Firestorm, because that's a cool name. So if I were to export this, this would be called Firestorm, and this one would have Firestorm at 2x, and then this one .png. This would just be Firestorm going out at 150 with PNG at the end. I can also export multiple versions of this. So here's a JPEG of it, and I will keep it at 1x. There's options when you hit export for the loss of it. I like to say, and they use actually a really great minifier for this. So it's actually the open source one that you would typically use. So like Image Optum, Image Alpha, as well as Image Optum, they use the same engine that is used for these, so the compression engines. I always just export at the highest way because I like to have all my images in the original resolution, and then typically on our like backend services and web applications, we then do the loss there, and it's just a little bit smarter to do that. You have more control of it. Another cool thing with Sketch is only some of those vector based have metadata inside of it. So if you ever export something from InDesign, Illustrator, and actually open it up like in a text editor, there's a bunch of junk that's added inside there, especially PNGs for some reason. And it's meant to work with, what's their file source called? A bridge. Yeah. So the reason why they include all that is so it works well with all the Adobe products, and it has all this metadata that you never visually see. It just increases the file size. In Sketch, you don't get that. With the few little stamps that come across in an SVG, which is like 1 or 2 lines that you can remove, so very minimal. If you throw it through any optimization tool, it'll automatically get rid of them. Other cool things related to the layering here, the exports of SVG actually render, again, if you go from top to right, the way that it's layered out here, and the file names that you have. So that's actually really, really important if you're making like an SVG that then you're working with a developer that you want to animate it. The same file names and layers are coming across in the export of the SVG, so you can animate it that way. So it doesn't come up as like jargon and random stuff and characters. The other really cool thing here is, as opposed to saying 2x, 1x, and all these different things, I can actually put in 500W, which means that this will come across at 500 width. So I can put specific dimensions inside here for this individual item here. So at this, I'll just say 500. Now that can happen on any individual layer, but you can also do it on any group, but you can also do it on any artboard. So every single thing can have its own export. Just to continue this, the other really nice thing is if I don't want to export this, but I just want to share it, there's this share feature right here. I love using messages for everything in my life. So when I'm working with people, instead of like having to save it, I can just immediately say like to messages, and it'll export it out to messages for them. You can also do an airdrop or create an email directly from here. You can add it to different places. I don't know why I would create a reminder on it, but whatever. That can happen. This will also not work, but you can add different, I think Slack has the ability of doing that, so you can share immediately from here. The other thing you can also do is I can just take this individual thing and drag it to, drag it to my desktop. Believe me, you can. Maybe it's not an individual layer. Failure. I know I can do that. But I can copy it, and I can also just paste it, and it will also like show up anywhere where I want it to be. I can go from one program to another, so just showing you. If I go to Photoshop right now, photo booth, I'm gonna take some photos.
And then Photoshop.
This new version of Creative Suite that came out, this is actually really cool. So that just came out this last week. If I paste this inside here, it brings in a Smart Object Vector version of this. If I go into Illustrator, gradients are a little goofy. They've gotten a little bit better, but the same thing back and forth between like an Illustrator, from like Illustrator to Photoshop also kind of screws up some of the gradients depending on how you actually build them out. So the same kind of error that you see from Sketch to Illustrator happens here. Cool. So now that's inside of here, and it brings up all the typical, like, I can interact with this, update it, and actually work in Sketch. And that's where I was saying, like, I create templates a lot of times in Sketch, and then I move them over to Illustrator, and it does a really, really good job of doing it. Now I can even take this guy that I've created in Sketch, and I'm just gonna take the inside piece of this and go back to Sketch. So this would be like if I was importing something from Illustrator from Sketch, it shows up in here and it brings in all the pieces. So if I were to take a more complex piece from, let's see what I want to share here. We'll go to Vibe. I'm trying to think of some of the stuff that we've done. If I can't find it here quick, I'll abandon this thought. This is one of my tangents that I said I'd go on, and no one stopped me. So,
747, yeah.
all right, cool, man. No, but this is one of those things that you're just gonna have to believe me, and I do a really shit job of of organizing this stuff here. All right, I'll open up. Oh, it's a PDF. All right, but if I could remember where I put those things, I converted everything over to Sketch, so that's why I don't know where a lot of those things are, and they're all in one document. But if I were to take them in, I can actually import it, and it'll come across. The difference is when I go from Sketch to Illustrator, it keeps the same format that I have. When I go from Illustrator to Sketch, it tries to do its best, and you have to be a little bit more precise with the naming in Illustrator. But even though I'm weird about naming conventions in order in all products, for some reason when I'm working in Illustrator, I see of it more like a cluttered desk, and that's probably why that also happens. But you can go back and forth and copy and paste, and I can also just paste this into like Photoshop. All right. Any questions on that? All right, let me do the last little export here just to finish that loop here. I'm going to say export. I'm going to create a folder called Pizza Hut and export it. And now I'm going to go to that great folder. And you'll see that there's a 500 width image that was made here, the Firestorm, JPEG, PNG, and all this stuff inside here. So those were all generated in one spot. Any questions right now? Because this is really, really important. That's just on the side of the actual graphic or an object.
So when you have artwork selected and you want to insert a new object, you can't just right click on the artwork, you have to do the insert menu.
Say that again?
So if you're wanting to insert objects onto an artboard, you can't just right click the artboard.
Yeah, you actually have to. So there may be a way of doing that, but out of the box you can't. You have to use either the menu up here or go to insert shape and put it there, or get familiar with like the tools that are there. And
are there in your horizontal menu right there,
Mhm.
are there options in that customize where you can put a rectangle up there? Or?
yeah, so
Oh, sick.
yeah, so there's rectangle, oval, and all these different things.
Right on.
Okay, where'd you go to get that?
You click anywhere outside the buttons, and you go to customize toolbar.
Now, is there like a Pathfinder for this stuff, like for shapes and stuff?
For making a shape?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to cover that after I get done with this aspect. I'm not going to, because I went so hardcore into the right menu on those, every single type that you're adding in here. So if I just hit T and I start typing, hi. Well, that's great. It's the same thing for every single, it's all contextual. So now all my type stuff's here. Like I don't have to go find like the character editor or the paragraph styles. They're all right here. The auto width, fixed width is also there. I can also define it by just typing in a value. It's smart enough to know that. I can use styles here, which are really great. You can create global styles and reuse them across an individual document or multiple documents. It is not necessarily the best for kerning, Again, this is meant for more interface design when it comes to text. And if you're a kerning expert, you would know like any of the auto kerning stuff isn't a true kerning. There's probably a 3-hour long lesson on just kerning. And some of that is actually based off biased opinion. You can have a team of 20 designers argue about a half quarter pixel of a logo. Just look at the Facebook logo over the past 10 years, and every time they announce a new logo, it's usually just a kerning change. Anyways, but this is based off of the actual CSS properties that exist out there. So the spacing is done that way. So it is kind of like guardrailing you to create designs that work on the web or inside of native applications. But if you are creating a graphic design like a logo, manual kerning is the best way of doing it. With text, a lot of times, so what I like to do is to take a duplicate layer and say, all right, so and editable is a word I made up. Hide it, and then from here, on the same layer here, group those together. Highlight this and say convert to outlines. From here, it creates it as its object, which I'll cover in a second. And then this is where you can start like moving these individually around and edit each individual aspect of it. So that's where it gets into more of like the precise or precision when it comes to design. One of the things.
That's what you would call the manual kerning.
Yeah, yeah. There's also, similar to any design program, there's text on path. There's, oops, why do I keep doing that? Text to path. If you're doing it in a circle, I wish there was a good solution on that. Math does not work in the favor of doing something in a path that's in a circle. Anytime that you see a design that has text around a circle, if it's done correctly, it was probably done by hand, just because there's so much that's involved with that the calculations can't actually happen. And I don't know why that is. If you think about it for many long hours, yeah, I don't know. But if I want to like do around paths, there's ways of doing it. I don't typically do that, so text on path. Oop. Create a text on path is right there. So I can create like a shape or a line, and it'll follow it, and it'll change each individual item there. Again, that's kind of a dorky thing to do majority of the time, and it works the same way as it would like in Illustrator. Left-hand side here, artboards are at the top. I mentioned pages. I can create a new one here. A lot of times if I'm working on like conceptual designs, I have them here, and then I have it like design concepts, and then I'll have like final logo or something like that, and then put just my final logo there and like the variations of it and the associated ones.
We have a question over here.
Yeah.
Do your pages exist on the same plane? As in, could you essentially scroll from one to the other?
No, they're completely different. So this is completely like refreshed. So you don't carry them over.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like, that's where, again, instead of having like multiple files, I do all of them in one spot. And I'll show you an example once I'm done with this left-hand side on all this and talking about shapes. So these layers, talked about grouping already, the hide, easy. The filtering is really the next piece when you go down here. That is really, really cool. So this is why it's really important to name your layers. Photoshop, if you've ever explored some of the search features in them, there's some nice things, but like the right click is probably the best thing to do. Inside here, if I right click on this, there's not much that it really gives me until we get into like the symbol piece of it. The filtering right here is fantastic. So it will narrow it down. I do a lot of things with states and state maps, and they're all named the right way. I'm horrible with geography, so when someone's like, "Hey, where's Wyoming?" I'm like, and I type it in and I find it, because I don't know how to Google. But that's there, and that's really nice. The hard thing about this is if you're like, where did all my layers go? It stays persistent, which is good and bad. This also works on artboards. So if I said copy two, copy two, it will just bring in the artboards there. It's cool. All right, getting into, I'm gonna make a new piece here, just call it a new page, make an artboard, hit A, drag it here. When creating a shape, let's start with a rectangle. And I'm just gonna center this right here. This is just a square. This is where the edit kind of comes in play. Once I hit edit, it's going to bring all the different points that make this up. I can drag and move this inside here. A really awesome thing is like, it's like, oh, okay, so this point's here. I can highlight it. And because Sketch loves math, it will tell me that this is at 116 and then like, this one's at 147, or 348. I can use math on that and bring it in 20 pixels, which is really nice. If I want to know the actual center, instead of like calculating 116 to 148, I can hold down the shift key and it will go as a middle in between them. And then I can do in between these, so that would be a quarter. And then from there, if I wanted to do something more, I can have those both highlighted and do something like that. If I only wanted one, which was what I initially meant to do, I can do the same thing. You can hold shift and it kind of locks it down for you too, this is one of those visual feeling things, as opposed to like watching it, but I'm holding down shift, and then this is me not holding down shift, it's just kind of free ranged. Now, once I have a point here, I can double tap on it and it will change the point type that's there, or you can select them right here. You can also add a radius on it and it will curve it based off that. Ooh, look at that. You can do that all night long, you know. Look at that. And the cool thing about this is like, if I screw this up, I can be like, how do I get this back here? Instead of like eyeballing it, which I did just snap back, but I can also just highlight one of these and be like, oh, it's from the Y, it's at 101. Let's put it back at 101 and type it back in there. So with this, like mathematical design comes into play really easily, and to build out different shapes, it's fantastic. Now, rectangles are easy to work with. Ovals are a little bit more complex, so I hit O and I'm gonna make a circle. Now, to make a half circle, we have all these points here. It's like, all right, well, I can delete this, and then I have this weird shape. That is not a half circle. And then it's like, well, let me try to straighten this out here. And it's like, ooh, that's even worse. It's kind of a half circle, or it looks like, I don't know. The best way of also editing shapes is why I bring in the scissors. The scissors cut out the points in between. And now that becomes a half circle. But if you look at this, this path is now open. So this is a concept of an open. Sometimes you want that. You can still fill it in. It's just a little weird. It will also kind of bark at you when you export it outside of it. It will allow you to do it. If I go to edit right here and I look at the points, it has me wanting to continue this. So I can manually just do this. Manually connect it right here and it will close it for me. And that's the difference between open path and you can hit this. If I didn't get stuck in there, open paths, it's going to lock you into trying to make you do it, because Sketch hates that, because it's like an unedited, or it's an incomplete design element, and this isn't a line. You have to convert it to an outline. So then it knows that it's just a line as opposed to a shape. So by doing this, I say finish, and now I have this nice little path here, and here it is. I covered a lot in a short amount of time right there. Does that make sense? That is super powerful and super awesome. And if I were to drag this down and put this in here, you can make some really easy shapes like what does Pac-Man actually look like? I guess he has a curve at the top, but this is a really shitty Pac-Man. Shit. Yeah, you get the picture. There we go. This looks like a weird fetus. But playing around with those are, you could spend a day talking about that, but that's how you make the different shapes and the different pieces. The next really important piece here is, let's go back to a rectangle. And let's make a new layer with an oval. So here we have this. I'm going to fill this in with purple, and I'm going to make this be yellow. It's more of a mustard. It's to match my sweater here. As I mentioned earlier, blend modes are right here. So that's where they are, that drop down. So they're a little hidden. Let's just go to a, it's not going to do much. Great, but you can see how blend modes work inside here. But if I wanted to, I realized I skipped over that earlier, so sorry. If I wanted to cut this out of this shape, so this becomes more like, you know, a circle inside here, or like a cutaway shape. There's various ways, like, you know, if I really wanted to do a shitty, I could fill this in as white and it looks like that. That's never anyone's ideal way of doing that, and then cutting it halfway. This is where the union, subtract, interact difference comes into play, and this is absolutely amazing how Sketch handles this. All I need to do is select the layers that I want to either combine or remove from each other. So if I wanted this rectangle to have this shape be a part of it, and this to be yellow with this red line, I can say a union, and it's going to make that there for me. The cool thing about this is it keeps the shape inside here, so I can move it around. So that can go like that. And I can use the math functions inside here too. Typically when I'm making a shape, I make it be based off the coordinates of the artboard, because these are based around it, and move it around from there. Or I find out where that piece is, and then I'm like, I want this 20 from there, and that's where that comes into play. Really nice. To undo it, I can also just drag it out, and then that piece is back out there, but I've lost styles. So there's no history here, so I'm going to hit undo, which is Control-Z, or if I go to File, Edit, Undo. Now, if I want to cut it out from here, I do the exact same thing, and I say subtract. And those work actually the way that you imagine them to work. I can move this guy in the middle. I did it backwards. Keep you guys on your toes. And now that piece is there. Now, if you look at this again, I showed you like that individual piece is there. If I were to actually finalize my design, what I always do as a last step is I select my shape that I have, and I do flatten. Oops. And what that does is it kind of, this shape is of course going to keep that. In more complex shapes, it will merge the pieces together and reduce the amount of layers. And why that's important is when you export this to SVG, especially if it's going to be used on the web or moved into another program, it's way cleaner than having all those empty layers inside there. And it combines it and reduces the file size that's actually created. So that's a really, really understated, powerful thing to do with that simple button right there. Now, this is where I was saying the auto creation of a logo. can also happen. Let's go here and make this. Now, this guy right here doesn't look like much. Oh wait, I'm going to show you one more thing with why that's also cool with the flatten. So this is already a default flattened image. So anything that, or symbol. If I go to layer, convert to outlines, you can see that it made these pieces for me. Now, if I wanted to keep that where like that inside piece was right here, so now I have two different objects or symbols that were created. One that's just the background color, and then one that's the outline. So I can remove that and make variations of my design very quickly. And it's based off of like this, just the inside piece. If you guys think or have ever done silk screening, it's like the exact same way. It's like having these layers that are cut away from each other or subtracted out, but then you can combine them together. So a lot of like final designs and graphics, I like to have them in those layers, especially if you have a full color version or a black and white version, like a flattened version of it. That's really, really nice to do. And then you just start deleting and removing layers. Back to where I was. All right, so I just made an oval shape here. We are going to make a flower. Right now, this doesn't look like much. We have this. Let's make it be beautiful, because it's such like the flower weather right now. And I'm going to just get rid of this. And we'll make it be purple. So I'm going to bring this right here. And this goes back and also shows you like that contextual piece here. I can do one of the coolest things ever. And this is the rotate. Well, first let me show you rotate. So rotate, you can click there, or you can just go in the corners and you can rotate it. And you can also do the angles on anything right there. So like, you know, true 45-degree right there. But there's what's called, rotate copies, which is under the layer path, rotate copies. If you haven't picked up on this, I don't like to remember where things are, and I like to use search. I have enough in my head to remember about other things that I won't do that. I then look at this and I say, how many of these, how many petals do I want? So I'm going to make 12 petals and hit rotate. From here, I can bring this in and then shift them around. And you can do like really cool things around this. The interesting thing is, once I have completed with this, they're all individual. This is like if you ever want to make a clock, it's like a built-in clock generator. I can take all these and then I can union them and then I can move them together. Oops, I missed one of the petals. I moved that by accident. Oh, my design's so fucked up. I could also just put it in a layer, but you get the picture. That is a super powerful thing. That is a very common, difficult thing to do. And having the ability to use that little small feature, the rotate copies, comes into play more so than you would ever think. Because to do a design like this would be the biggest pain in the ass to do. And this is where I was saying like, all right, let me make my own like fake little logo. It's like, okay, rotate, oops. Rotate copies. Oh, I missed it. Oh, where's my window on that? I don't know why it's not doing that for me. Oh, yeah, thank you. And then you can just, you know, make something really cool. Like, there's an atom. So next time someone's like, can you make me an atom in 5 seconds? It's like, yes. So that's cool. All All right, rotating, blah, blah, blah. I want to make sure I didn't skip over anything there. The line tool is really crappy, but you can use it to start building out very custom things. The pen tool we did talk about, I hit P. It's the worst thing ever. And because it tries to be too smart for you. So this is where I'm like, this is not a designing tool. I've tried to tweak this in every which way, and you'll notice that it creates a new shape for each one. This is a face. Yeah. Hey. Yeah, do you see it? It's a cloud. So I wouldn't use the pen tool for very much of anything. It's just really nice to do that.
Well, check that out. It shows you the actual like shape.
Yeah, of each individual thing.
That's super helpful. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any questions on that stuff? As I said, we were starting off slow, and then we are going to go absolutely crazy.
Does anybody need to re-up on
Alcohol.
anything?
Do you want me to throw you one?
Quick 2-minute break.
Yeah. Well, let me show you one last thing that I forgot to cover. I was trying to go by memory here. There is grids that are built in. So in your artboard, you can have a grid that you can show right here. And you can customize those however which way you want. And there's a grid setting. So again, if I go to grid settings, it's right there. I can change it, the colors. I can make it my default setting, all these things. I'm not going to turn that on right now, so I'm going to turn it off. But if I actually want to make a grid design, I can say make grid, and it will say how many rows and how many columns and what are the margins and gutters that I want. And I go like this, and it will make it for me. And this can be like any object that you want. It can be the most complex thing ever of all time, and it will duplicate it. So like this guy, if I want to say make, oh geez, why do I keep doing that? Make grid, let's make it 1 by 7. It's going to make 7 of these down here. So I meant to do the other way. It's been a long day in the life of Kevin Mack. And there's that. So those are all in there. I don't know why that's taking so long to render. I'm also recording this on 2 different methods, so I'm using a lot of graphic card stuff here. And that was the last piece of that section. If we want to take a quick 2-minute break, and then when we get back, I'm going to show you quick prototyping and how to prototype, and then how you look at this on a device. And then we are going to get into the number 1 or number 2 coolest thing of Sketch, which is symbols, and then I'll directly get into the demo. All right, class. This lesson is going to make you lose your mind. You are going to go straight up bonkers. Are you guys, did you guys bring your anti-crazy pills? Because you're about to go crazy. Mom, Dad, don't call the cops. We're about to get loud. So we are creating an artboard here. I am going to make, have you guys ever heard of a button? Yeah, button. They're used all the way across the entire internet. So I have used the rectangle shape. I hit the R and I'm going to hit the T and I'm going to write button. And I'm going to use, not this font, I'm going to use Roboto just because I am a fanatic of it. I don't know why, it's my go-to. So far, Hunter, you have not missed anything that exciting, but you're about to. And we'll make it 18 pixels. And I'm going to make this be a traditional height. 40, and the width doesn't really matter. So we're going to put this guy inside here. And I usually call these things something like background. Mind blowing, right? And I call it text. So the default is going to bring in the text that you have. I'm going to group these two together. So I just right-clicked and did group selection. You can also go really out of your way and go to layer and group. And I'm going to call this a button. This is mind-blowing right here. The other thing I didn't mention in exports is if I go like this, and I do an export, it's going to create a folder called yo with a file called button inside of it. And you can also do it in the prefixes too, which is really nice actually if you want to put your exports of like 2x in a different folder and different things, like PDFs in one, you can do the exact same thing. So who's gone crazy yet? No one? All right, so this is a button. I'm going to make this, I'll keep it in red. I'm going to take this text and I don't know what I was just saying there. I'm going to take this text and I'm going to make it be this width. So I'm just going to drag it there. I could also then highlight this and find out the width of this. Why would anyone make something be 277? I'll make it 250. And I will highlight this layer of text and make it also 250. I had them both selected. That's fantastic. I'm going to center my text. Ooh, and now we have a button. Now, if I wanted a bunch of buttons, I could copy this, but that's not fun. What I can do is I can right-click and create what's referred to as a symbol. Mystery. And it'll pop up and say, what do you want to name this? I'm going to call it like, okay, button. But I want to be a little bit smart, and I usually call them in a category like CTA, so call to action / and I'm going to say create. Ooh. Now I have this. That doesn't mean much, but now instead of having multiple layers, what I can do is I can say, and go up here and I can say, document, insert CTA button. Now I have 2 of them. Ooh. But say I wanted to change my global styling for my buttons. I can do that now. And what has also been auto-generated is this symbol section. So anything that's considered a symbol is all grouped inside the symbol. Now I can go to my background and I can say, ooh, let's make it purple with white text. Without even hitting save, let's go back to page 1 and look, they're updated. It is, but watch what's next here is I can change the text here and say, yo, pizza boy. Literally the first words that I have. So, and the cool thing about symbols are you can also apply some of those global styles like the text changes, the background changes, and you can create one version and then modified versions of it very easily. So these are great for reusable components in your design. They're also really great if you have something that's more than one. Because like back to like that pedal example, I could have created one of those pieces as a symbol. And as opposed to clicking on each one of them, I could have then done the duplicate or the rotate copies and then update it in one spot and it would update in all of it. Right? You guys don't seem that excited about it, but the other thing here is I can change the size of it. Ooh. And then I can go like this. And do you see how it stays in the middle? Ooh.
I like it's not changing your text at all.
Yeah.
Like it's not modifying the
Yes. However, if I wanted to, I can go back into symbols and I can highlight this guy. And you can see right here, it has a fixed size, meaning that this is going to go here, but I can also do this and it's going to grow. This little preview thing is going to show me how this operates. If I wanted it always to be in the top left, right, I could hit this and then this and go back to that. Oh, and it's at the width of it. So if I went longer, give me a second here. I meant to change this. So this is going to be Like this, and fixed size right there. I made that way too big, so that's why it's not going through here. Ah. So do you see where like that's getting cut off at like the 250 here? But now if I try to scale this up, it's kind of like static there in the left top right. But if I wanted to change it and make it be always at the bottom, what do you know? You can do that, but it's growing that size. Yeah, and because I didn't put the heights variable. So you can set variable heights, so it changes as you're expanding and shrinking it. You can also go and fix heights and widths, so it stays consistent and constant. And then you can decide if you want it to be in the center, the top, the right, the bottom, the left, or on both sides. If I have it being centered in the middle, I would have it highlighted on one side and the other. And if I wanted to be the full width where this was expanding, I would just go in there and update that. So remove this, go here, and then this, and then that's just going to grow, and you can see the preview right there. Oops. Why did that happen? What in the tar? If you get really screwed up too, you can also say set to original size, and it's going to shrink it back to the size of the object. Sometimes that happens if you're converting something over and you decide to add 20 pixels and then it looks a little goofy. You can just say convert it back or play with it and move it around. These are incredibly helpful and handy. Now, I can now also, when you create a symbol, you can decide to make them global. So I can bring in one of like the primary buttons, and then this is going to work in any document. So if you have your own brand or you're working on a client, you can create different ones for your client and bring them into any single project. The cool thing about this is it's managed in another Excel file. Excel. Why did I say Excel?
I knew it was a PowerPoint.
I know. So I create, this is getting into like how to use Sketch. We create what's referred to as element collage. My buddy Tim Bondrel and I, we came up with different methodologies for design. One was this color theory that every interface has a primary, secondary, dark, light, and accent color. And then for each color, you have primary, primary light, primary dark, primary accent, secondary dark, secondary light, secondary accent. So a basic interface or brand usually has one primary color, a secondary color. Sometimes they have a tertiary. So you have a tertiary, then you would have 24 colors. But most interfaces that you build out, you can get away with, you should really only have somewhere around 20 colors. So we started doing this with then variations based off of opacity on them if you need something else. So as a designer, sometimes you're like, oh, I need that one highlight color, and you're like, let me pull a color out of my ass. And then you hand it off to a developer and they don't use that color. They pull it out of your ass because they don't understand like small tweaks. And this is to have better communication between designers and developers. Instead of being like, use the blue one, it's like, use the primary color. And then also if your brand changes from like a coding perspective, a naming convention, your primary color, if you go through like a redesign, can go from like a purple color to a red color. And you're updating it in one spot and it'll cascade through both in like your design in Sketch as well as in your code.
Is this document included in the course fee?
Yeah, actually, this is, I don't know where I have, it's in, I have a whole presentation about colors that I've recorded on my YouTube, so it's on youtube.niceTransition.com, as well as typography. So we identified that every interface has a header, a section header, an article header, a paragraph, and then each of them have their subsides. So page header, page subheader, section subheader, article header, article subheader, paragraph, and then variation on mobile. So with that, it's like this limitation or kind of handcuff to be like, we have 20 colors or 24 colors to work with. And then from an interface, as opposed to, again, pulling like a random size out, kind of restricting it to variations that are consistent. So it's all about consistency here. But if I were to highlight these, they each have like their own name. And I can also use these globally across all my projects because I've made this be a shared library. And the same thing with the global colors here. So if I want to keep consistency, so it's like my page header is rubato condensed bold. It also has inside here, which I didn't cover earlier, the text transform and some of the different text things here. If I have colorations on here, that's where some of those theming things come in, the styles come into play, and you can have multiple versions of them. I've seen people do like page header and like page header like light, page header dark, based off like your theming and contrast ratios that you have out there. But designing all the core elements in here then gives me all my independent pieces that I can build out my interface and references. This is just saved out as a, you save it out as a sketch file, and then to make it be globally used, you say save as a template. And then based off that, when I say control new, remember that start schedule, I can say like start from whatever it is. You can make a template, reusable pieces, and then you can also make these libraries be used globally in the next kind of save screen. So you never have to recreate that design. And then, as I showed you on the screen, here's this button that I imported in. What I can do is, so this is that primary button in my symbols. I can hit find and say primary, and look, I can find it right here. I can highlight this, skipped over this piece earlier. One of the coolest things is if I hit Command 3, it's going to center it for me. And I was doing this unnaturally, as I said, like I'm really used to using the shortcuts. If I hit Command plus, it's going to zoom in on it. No matter what I highlight and hit Command 3, it's going to center it in the middle of my canvas for me. Very, very useful. So as like we were way over here, and even though I had this highlighted, I was like, where is that? I hit Command 3, and it makes it right there for me. Now, I can change my primary button here. Now I have it highlighted. Bless you, my child. And let's make it be this. This is gonna break the world for me. Yeah, so I'm gonna hit save here. When this happens, I get a notification up here that this button has changed. So the library updates available, plugin update, shared library available. If I click that, it will tell me what it is. And then I can say like, I want to update that. I really don't want to do this because this is also being shared in the cloud, and then that will cascade through literally all of our sketch files right now. But that is how you do it, and that's why this is like super powerful, is if you realize that like maybe your primary button, you as we showed earlier, like this color picker, I picked the wrong color and someone's like, that's not our brand color. Instead of going through each one, we can update it in one spot, and it'll update it, and it'll alert everyone that it's been changed. It's also really great for like icons. So especially like as you're building out an interface, you can make a placeholder for an icon, and then as those designs are getting refined, then you can update it, and it happens in all these places. So this is where it's kind of a mind shift of where designers are so used to the tools. You can start thinking of like the same way that developers think about like components and reused pieces across one another. I do realize that Photoshop put out something similar to this about now like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I've not had great success with that, and this one has just been very smooth, and also with it being more vector based, it's been really nice. The shared styles inside there. All right. Any questions about symbols, because they're really powerful?
The notifications for anybody that's essentially like has the shared document, those notifications are carried through to everyone.
Yeah. And that all happens in, so there's, how do I access that? Adobe Cloud. What do I
Is
do?
there like or a feature to like notate or like create notes or something like that or no?
There's probably a plugin for that.
Okay.
And as you can see, I undid that, so I only have 2 notifications there. That is a good question, and I do want to hit on this. Plugins are fantastic. Plugins exist right here. These are some of the ones that I have. So it's like random faces. We use a lot of QR codes nowadays. Like it's funny. I used to bash them, but they're actually really great in the retail space, and especially because it's built into all cameras in iOS and Android. You just put it up to it, and it recognizes it and sends the person right to it. Lorem ipsum generator. This one's really cool. So this is where I was saying like I do print stuff in here. I'm like, all right, well, how big is this canvas? If I highlight this artboard and I go to plugins and I go to units, I can go resize and I can say, make it inches, 8.5 by 11, and it will make that 8.5 by 11 for me. And so then I can move things around. I can make this be 1 inch by 1 inch and start thinking about it in more of a print term. So even though this is all done in points, not pixels, definitely not inches, you can then also figure out like what is an inch, update your grids, and then you can start working in like a pseudo weird way of thinking about print design in a development or a graphic design tool. Why I like to do this is because my shared libraries. So I can have consistency between my web as well as print and set those up. And then when I make my templates, then export them and then do like the data merges and imports. Cool. All right, so we're gonna take this button and I'm gonna change this to one of the sizes, one of the first things that we covered. I have a iPhone 11 Pro. We're gonna have this button here, and this is a screen. So we're gonna make this be whatever. And I'm gonna say, hi, Kyle.
So good.
Nothing much, how are you? More. And I'm going to copy this over here, not paying that close attention to this as I would just due to time. Sup, man, because that's how we talk. Done. So I've created 2 screens. This is a great user flow, great application here. I can highlight this, and this is without using plugins. There's a lot of amazing plugins for prototyping and Sketch. But I can go in here and I go to prototyping and I can say add link or link to various things. But let's just say add link to artboard. And then it's like, oh, where do I want to go? I can go here. You can also click in and make these be dynamic to kind of like, this is really easy to use. And I'll highlight some of the pieces here. But you can click inside of it. You can actually create a document that has a fixed height with a longer body. And you can open it up on your iPhone and you can actually scroll inside of a Sketch document, which is really, really awesome. And it can remain fixed. So all I've done is I hit this button. So I selected the layer, for lack of a better name. I guess it is called a layer. And I went to prototyping and I said add link. And I went to this artboard. Now, from here, I can say preview prototype. Ooh, that's how it works. And it brought up a browser. So this actually creates like an HTML version of it based off SVG. There's some different plugins that you can turn this and convert this into HTML. And it's like a small little application. So you can easily make like a walkthrough of a wireframe or your design without doing any development. You can also then from here navigate back to other things, which is kind of cool.
Is that shareable?
Yes, if you have Adobe Cloud. So Adobe Cloud does make a public available that you can turn on and you can share it to anyone.
Adobe Cloud?
Jesus, my, yes, Sketch Cloud. With,
That would be like in, like an Envision or something like that.
yeah, so,
I think you can do something similar in InDesign, but like last time I did that, which was ages ago, it seemed incredibly wonky and not really all that effective. Um, so like is Sketch like really common for doing this sort of prototyping?
oh yeah, and so like for things like this, I used to really love doing it in Keynote was probably the first one that I did, and then what's the one that got really expensive that I no longer use? It's a question for myself. Begins with an I. Envision. Yeah, that's the prototyping one. So Envision kind of does this. You can actually go direct from Sketch to Envision, and they can sync up too, which is nice. So if you like to use Envision for comments, feedback, you can have your Sketch file and the prototyping that you're doing be synced up, so then you can get feedback and also like do live updates, and it happens in real time. When I have this, so I was just doing a straight animate, but you can also go from each individual interaction and say prototype, animate from left. And then I can go back here and say preview. Ooh. And then right now this is not doing anything, but I can say, oh, just animate. Oh, link to previous artboard. So what this means is if I had multiple flows inside there and I had a back button, no matter what path I went to, it would go to the last screen that I was on, as opposed to like linking it back. So I could have a difference between back versus like a home button. Ooh, hi. And then I want to just show you this on my phone. Hopefully nothing really embarrassing pops up here. So this is where I trust the crowd. And if you guys don't know this, in QuickTime, it's the easiest way to share your phone. So this is my phone right now. So hi. So there. So anyways, there's a program called Sketch Mirror. And when I open this up, it brings up all the artboards that I've been working with inside here. This is fantastic because I can actually see my interface in the context of what it is. And you can connect this to various devices. So it's like, oh, on my screen, that 40 pixel button seems really large. But it's like the minimum click area should always be 40 pixel on mobile. And when you actually see it on here, it looks really tiny. And that's where it's like the difference between my mom. The difference between, yeah, hi, my mom. The difference between, oh, Gmail. The difference between like seeing it inside of like your computer versus on here is amazing. And why this is cool is it's really like real time. So as I move it here, let me show you my screen.
No way.
Yeah, so it's live. So this is what's on my phone right now. And let me just move this. So in like as soon as I unselect it, it's gonna update right there. So, oh mom, come on, you're embarrassing me in front of all my friends. And this is also really nice because I can click on it and I can actually see how it would look like. So you can make really great like stuff. And then with this, there's different settings. As I mentioned, you could do a whole class on animation, some of the different plugins. So each of these also have their own settings. So if I had something like fixed position when scrolling, I can make something static and continue from one thing to another.
You could literally do UX research for next to nothing. Just give someone your phone and say, here,
Yeah.
do this task.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And it-
Sketch just for this.
Yeah, it's really cool. All right, so we're coming up on the end of time, and I never got to my demo. Worst. I'm going to show you a recent project I did. So, you know, I'm in startup life. I lost way too much money in the past 3 years being an entrepreneur. You know, consider doing, always reconsider going into entrepreneurship and startup world, because you do not make a lot of money in the beginning,
Believe, man, believe.
but it is worth it. Alcohol is discounted because of us now. So it will all work out. All right, so this is a recent project, and sitting next to me is one of the very talented designers I've had a privilege to work with in my life. So that's Ryan. If you guys didn't pick up on who I was talking to and pointing to, I was pointing to him. He actually, Ryan's been trying to pick up some design work and met someone, and I was like, sure, I'll help you out on this project. And he needed a logo. I was like, well, Ryan can do it. So Ryan made the logo for this. Anyways, we started this project with creating the element collage. I always do this at the exact same time that I'm doing my wireframes. These have gotten a little goofed up because I keep them in the same project. So it's kind of the good and bad thing of having them in the same project. If I were to actually open up the initial wireframes that I had in here, this is how it looked. So I went through the process of, you know, typical client discovery, talking to them, creating kind of placeholder text, prioritization of content, making the content zones the blocks, walking them through it, and getting like the sign off on the user flow from here. That was done in Sketch at the same time when I was doing the digital branding and Ryan was working on the logo. The cool thing about this is once the wireframes were approved, I literally just copied and duplicated this page and then created it and made it be my design. From my element collage, I created all the different titles and headers inside here. So I would just go through and right click on all my headers inside here, and then they got replaced. So like I showed you that design in here, but you can see that this is a page header associated with it. And then all the different ones are inside there. So I went from wireframe to element collage to a full design very, very quick. And then I built out all the individual design components and each of these pieces as their own individual symbol. And from there, I went from this like fluid motion of conceptual wireframe, prioritization, to putting in some content, actually designing it with a direct relationship to the wireframe that I created. And now all these pieces are like their own individual symbols, and I can reuse them on this project, and if I had other projects for them. I don't know why this may not be the final one. Yeah. And I could recreate them and make different variations of this and continue to grow out different projects for them, which is really, really cool. So that's a very quick thing. To really, really fast go through this. Let's go like this. Let's make a quick wireframe. We're going to go to the responsive web. We're going to make it be desktop size. I'm going to go here. I'm going to make a rectangle here, wireframe this out. I'm going to call this here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to call this header. I'm going to call this footer, which is not what I meant to do because I meant to call those backgrounds. I'm going to create a selection here. This is intentionally fast. Footer. And I'm going to call this background. And I'm going to call this header background. I'm going to move this down to the bottom of my screen here. And it's going to be my header. And I'll be like, all right, a header is not ever really that size. Zoom in here. Inside my header, what do I need? I need a logo. My logo is going to be here. Place there. I'm going to have some links here. It's going to be called link 1. I don't know why that keeps happening to me. Link 1, duplicate this. I'm going to make them, 20 pixels apart. I could get really fancy and use the grid tool and copy this over. Put these inside here. call this logo, call this link, group this, call it navigation. Okay. If I wanted to have like a search over here, here's my search box. And again, it's from left to right and then top to bottom. So that's kind of like my header here. I'm going to copy this and just put this down in the footer. And move it to the bottom. And I'm going to say minus 20 pixels so it's not like resting down there. And then I'm going to move it to the left over here and say 20. So it's at 2020. I'm going to make this be here. Oops. I'm going to make this aligned to here. But this is at the top of this. So I'm going to actually add 20 pixels to its height so it has a consistent border around it, which will then dump it down 20, minus 20. And so now it's just kind of there at the bottom. From here, I would add in like other zones and whatever they may be. And let's just put in another rectangle. We'll call it a button. We'll put some text here that says header. Oops. And I'm just going to call this like a hero zone. I was hoping someone would sing that we could be heroes, but no one did. Anyways, so, you know, you saw me make a button earlier. I'm not going to go through the steps of doing that. But I would build out my entire interface and kind of like whiteboard this out, or like whiteboard on my sketch and get all the prioritization, all the zones, all the features I want. But from here, I'm going to say create symbol, and I'm going to call this wireframe header. I'm going to create that.
Sketching it out right now.
Yeah, nice one. And I'm going to say wireframe footer, and I'm going to call this wireframe hero. I may want to call this like content zone and then hero if I wanted to do something like that. What did I call it? I did? Oh, whoa. Well, whatever. And for each of these, I would then go into here. And I would also make a symbol here and call it like wireframe button. You get the picture. I would do it for each thing. These are all here. From here, I show this to the client. They're like, great, that's exactly what I want it to look like. I'm like, cool. That was easy. But it's going to be about, and it's going to say taco. So cool. They approved that. From the design side, duplicate. And now I'm in the design page. From inside here, you can see I can select and change out the symbols that are inside here, which is really cool. So if I had multiple buttons, I could change them. I can also go here and select from one of my other libraries and use this button. Oops, I selected the wrong layer. I'm going to select this guy. And you can have symbols within symbols, and you can change them out and be variations. Like this is really good for like radio buttons, checkboxes. You can make one, and you can make it be dynamic as you're working in there. So I can just change this sub piece here. I don't know why it won't let me scroll. Well, let's go with that symbol. Again, we're running out of time. And I'm going to change this to the Bibe one very quickly. I'm going to change my header to be our Bibe page header. I really goofed this up. There we go. And then I will use whatever. That is not my global colors. There's other plugins that you can have that you can save global colors from one machine to another, and then like move them over from one thing to another. Let's add in some fun little things that we have here, like where are my components here? I probably have screwed this up from doing like other demos inside here, because I usually have like all of our beer stuff. But the point of it is, like, I can easily make something that looks more like our brand and then start actually designing the pieces out and move these into like realistic spots, like where they should be, and like go in here and be like, oh, I actually want this to be 40 pixels from the left, and I want it to be 80 from the top, and I always want this guy to be in the bottom right, and then I want it to be 20 pixels away, and do this and pin it right there. So now it's like in that bottom, so if this changes, it moves with me. But you can see, like, if we had some more time here, like, that you can easily convert from like a really shitty wireframe to a design. If you have these like reusable pieces, you can build out an interface really fast. So let me look at my notes really fast here, just to make sure I didn't hit on like miss one of the really cool pieces. Oh, I started talking about the plugins. I did not cover that. The manage plugins. This is where you go out there and you can see all the ones that you run. You can say get plugins, and I can do a search. So if I wanted something that was, I'm trying to think of something, pictures. Oh, what the hell? Images, yeah. But like it's really crazy. Like there's almost something for everything here. There's prototyping. So if I did like prototyping, if I did colors, like save colors, ColorMate's actually a really great one. You click on it, it will take you to a place that most developers are familiar with. As a designer, you may not be. From here, you see this thing that looks very confusing. Majority of them have nice descriptions, so it's just like ignore all the code and go here, and you can download the latest one. If you do not see something here, this is the important thing to know. You want to go to releases, and from here click on this and it will download the latest version of it.
So from the,
I never download things like this, so I would just pull it down. Oh yeah, so it's right there. So and all of them have this install. Click down this file. I was just clicking on the exact same thing over and over again. From here, you have the zip file. Inside here, you have the Sketch plugin. I click on it, and voila, we have ColorMate installed. And that's it.
from the photographic standpoint, are there any photographers that do anything within Sketch? I know you said that
Yeah, so let me,
photo manipulation is not.
let's go back in that weird graphic I made earlier, this desktop.
And this is a question asked with the understanding that it's vector-based.
Yeah, well, here I'm bringing in a JPEG, so you can see the background color here. Oh, I didn't mention this. This is one of those things I forget about. There's background color, and you can say include and export. And if you have that include and export, any layer inside there is going to bring that color in. So if you're exporting it as a JPEG, it's going to bring that in, even if you have the individual symbol. So we have this, and this is a flat image. It's a JPEG. The design tools in here they're awful. But again, this is not meant to be used for designing. You can do some color adjusting here. Yeah, look at that. Brighten that up. That is probably the best thing you can do. They do have, it's possible that they got rid of it. Where is that? Give me 1 second here. Replace image. You can do a replace image. Oh, you double click on it, and they have this magic wand, which doesn't really ever work. But you can see like it's trying to get rid of it, and I can decide to like invert that and then crop around it. It's kind of crap. So that's pretty much all you can do. When it comes like image manipulation is the same stuff you can do in like Keynote. Yeah, that's cool. That's really helpful.
Nice.
But that's where it's like Photoshop, you still have to use that for like editing and other things. Cropping is good. But instead of cropping, I skipped over this. Masking is a little bit different. So I'm gonna create a mask here. So here's this, and I'm just gonna say, okay, mask. It's gonna make it into this group for me. And then you can see that's kind of put in there. So that's, and the cool thing with the mask is you can also have a background color. So you can see that it's kind of like in there. Ooh. And masking works not just on images, it works on any type of layer. As I said, that was going to be a sprint. You know, when someone says like 3 hours, it's like, oh, how are we going to cover that? This guy's moving really, really slow. But the reason why I was moving slow is to show you how Sketch has all these things built in that are intuitive and very contextual. And that's like the most important piece is like, don't think about this as how you use Photoshop or any Adobe products. And then trying to show you some of the pieces and highlights, tips, tricks, and how to get around using it. Because a lot of it's like exploratory once you know the foundational pieces on like how you can actually take advantage of the system as a whole. Any questions?
So when you're bringing in a raster image like that,
Mhm.
masking it, can you like link an image like in InDesign, or is it just?
No, yeah. So the best thing you can do, there may be a plugin for that, is to replace image. That's about it. There's no out of the box like direct linking or relative paths. No, it's kind of a bummer.
I think symbols is the jam. I think you get a handle on symbols.
Yeah.
Uh,
People do get funky and creative with the fills. I was trying to think of 3 people named Phil, but I couldn't. Anyways. Where is that? Give me 1 second here. What in the world? Why can't I think of... It's been one of those days. There is a fill that you can use for an image. And the last time I did this class, I covered that. Oh, shoot. Oh, why am I going to end on a bad note here? This is how you delete layers. Man, that's stupid. Because that's all the blend modes. We covered that. I don't know what this ticking noise is that I have. It's very annoying. Hopefully that doesn't become a new tick for me. I will find myself to being single again very quick.
No, I like cleanup.
I know. I better stop this tick thing. Well, you're just going to take my word for it. There we go. There must be image. Oh, I remember. It's the image icon. As I said, like Sketch does this thing where it doesn't have titles on it. You just kind of have to know where things are. So from here, you can do like repeated patterns. And then you can also go to something like on your desktop. You can also do these like tiles and imports. So here's a random face. There he is. And then with this, it's going to expand to fill this. But if I wanted to, I could also do a tile. So it's based off the size of the image. Very cool. Because everyone needs to see this guy 4 times. You can do a stretch. These are, you can submit your own face if you want to. That's a stretch versus a fit. So fit's going to be contained inside. Fill's going to try to do its best to fulfill the proportions of it. So, hi, what is up? Yeah, it's that. There's a lot more that could be covered, but did you guys learn something new?
Yeah.
So-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's better than the last class I taught. I said that and they were like, I'm gonna go now. Like, I'm kidding. They hugged me and
Aw.
put on a parade for me and dedicated a street to me. So if you guys ever find yourself in Portland, Ohio, it's now named, there's a street named Kevin Mack Street.
I didn't even know there was one in Ohio.
I just made all that up.
That prototyping function is.
Cool. No, but I said this earlier. I have some resources that I can also send out. I know a lot of you guys on an individual level, but these are all the plugins that I like to use all the time. Patty I didn't cover that, but it adds padding around. So if you have like text and you're like, I want this to have 20 around it, it'll expand the container to have like 20 pixels around it. And that's how you save like those colors. And then there's some of the community stuff that I can send over.
And these will all be in the recording too.
Yeah. I don't know how great this recording was. I kind of forgot that I was recording, but if I give it, can I give this to you and you can share my information?
Sure.
But I said this in the beginning, like I go by nice transition on everything, and if you have any questions about anything that we covered, or once you like start playing around, you're like, how do I do that again? Just feel free to hit me up. And if I don't respond, Kyle will also share my phone number. That's an easy way of getting a hold of me. Text, I like text. Messages. So that's that. So this is where I then vanish.
Yep.
Cue the curtain. Is that awkward? What did I just say?
No, it's great.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, well then I will bow.
All right. So
Thank you guys, thank you. I appreciate your time.